You have never heard such a noise in all your life as on that momentous night at Toad Hall. The banqueting room was absolutely packed with the wicked Wildwooders. Long tables stretched down the entire length of the room, and the weasels sat at the tables and on the tables and under the tables. The minstrel gallery was packed to overflowing, and there were still more, hanging, holding, sitting where they could. You see, it was a very big occasion. They were celebrating the Chief Weasel's birthday, so he sat at the high table, surrounded by his deputies, feeling very pleased with himself. The Assistant Chief Weasel rose to his feet to announce the speeches.
Hello, Weasels and Wildwooders! Hey! Silence for the Chief Weasel!
And as those cheers rang out, Ratty, Mole and Toad waited on the Badger's word.
Wildwooders, a word first about our kind host, Mr. Toad. Dear kind Toad. We all know Toad.
Hold hard a minute, said Badger. Are we all ready? Right, the hour is come. The Badger flung the door open wide, and oh my, what a squealing and screeching filled the air as the four fearless friends went into battle. To the panic-stricken Wildwooders, it seemed that the banqueting room was full of monstrous animals. The mighty Badger, his whiskers bristling, his cudgel whistling. The Mole, black and grim, brandishing his stick and shouting his awful war cry, "A mole! A mole!" Rat, desperate and determined, armed with weapons of every age and variety. Toad, frenzied with excitement and injured pride, swollen to twice his ordinary size and determined to get even with the Chief Weasel. The affair was soon over, and in the utter shambles of the banqueting room, the Badger stood back wiping his brow and surveyed the scene. Upturned tables and chairs, broken crockery, and a dozen or so dazed and battered weasels, on whom the Mole was busily engaged in fitting handcuffs. "Mole, old fellow," said the Badger. "Oh, just cut along outside, will you, and look after those stout sentries, though I don't think we'll have much trouble from them tonight." And as Mole vanished through the window, the Badger turned to Toad. "I want some grub, I do, Toad. So stir your stumps and look lively. We've got your house back for you, and you don't offer us so much as a sandwich." Toad was rather hurt that the Badger didn't say pleasant things to him. Still, he bustled about, as did the Rat, and they laid out on one table some cold chicken and tongue that had hardly been touched, a plateful of lobster salad, and a whole basketful of French rolls with cheese, butter, and celery. Then the Mole clambered back through the window, with a broad grin on his face, his arms full of rifles. "It's all over from what I can make out," he said. "As soon as the stoats heard the yells and shrieks from the hall, that they downed their rifles and fled. So it's all quiet outside. I think I'll join you fellas for supper." The weasel prisoners looked on in awe as the four fearsome animals, still armed, did justice to the remains of the banquet. Badger, a mouthful of ham, a chicken leg in each paw, and a pile of lobster salad before him. Rat, trying to eat 2 rolls at once, each packed with an assortment of cheese, chicken, and lettuce. Mole, at least he used a fork, tucking into the most enormous mixture piled high on his plate. And, of course, Toad. He rose to his feet, then cleared his throat. "My friends," he said, you don't know how happy I am to be back at Toad Hall. But without your help, it would never have happened. So to you, Badger, Mole, and Ratty, Thank you. Thank you indeed. 2 hours later, a very tired mole set free the weasel prisoners from the back door. They scampered across the garden, amazed that they'd been let off so lightly. Mole locked up the back door and made his way upstairs to bed, where Ratty, Badger, and Toad were already fast asleep and dreaming of the happy days that now lay ahead of them. The following morning, Toad came down to breakfast late as usual. The Mole and the Water Rat were chatting on the lawn, and Badger was sitting in an armchair deep in the morning paper. "I'm afraid there's a heavy morning's work in front of you, Toad," he said, without looking up from his paper. "You see, we really ought to have a banquet at once to celebrate this affair. It's expected of you. So I suggest that straight after breakfast you write out invitations to all our friends, and we'll have them delivered before luncheon." "What?" cried the Toad. "Me stop indoors and write letters on a jolly morning like this? Oh, yes, well, if you insist, dear Badger, then it shall be done. Now, you go and join our young friends in the garden. I shall sacrifice this fair morning on the altar of duty and friendship." The Badger eyed him very suspiciously, but said nothing, as Toad sat at the writing desk and straightway put pen to paper. And from what he wrote, it was obvious that the coming banquet was to be an all-Toad affair. It was noon, and Toad had finished all his letters and arranged for their delivery when the other animals came into the room. They marched up and stood defiantly before him. The Rat spoke first. "Now look here, Toad," he said. "It's about this banquet. Let me tell you once and for all, there are to be no speeches and no songs. We know what you're up to. We stopped the messenger boy and read your invitations." "Mayn't I sing just one little song?" pleaded Toad piteously. "Not even one," said the Badger firmly. "You know that all your songs and speeches are conceit, boasting, and vanity." "Toad, it's for your own good," said the Mole. "Do you want to be the laughing-stock of the Stoats and Weasels?" Toad left the room with faltering footsteps, his handkerchief pressed to his eyes. "Badger," said the Rat, "I feel like a brute." I know," said the Badger, "but it had to be done. It had to be done." My, oh my, what a gathering there was that night at Toad Hall. From near and far came the animals to celebrate Toad's return. And when Toad made his entry down the sweeping staircase, a great cheer rang out from the assembled animals. They gathered round, congratulating him and saying nice things about his courage, his cleverness, and his fighting qualities. But Toad only smiled faintly and murmured, "Oh, not at all," and, "Oh, good heavens, no, it was Badger, Mole, and Rat who bore the brunt of the fighting." It was the same after dinner. From around the great banqueting room came a chorus of cries for Toad to make merry as in the old days. But Toad only shook his head gently and raised one paw in mild protest. But if the other animals were amazed at Toad's modesty, Badger, Ratty, and Mole were absolutely astounded. He was indeed an altered Toad. After this great climax, the four animals led their lives in happy contentment. Toad sent presents to the jailer's daughter and the engine driver. He even compensated the barge woman for the loss of her horse, though under severe compulsion from Badger. Sometimes, in the course of long summer evenings, the friends would take a stroll in the wild wood, now successfully tamed as far as they were concerned, and they'd be greeted respectfully by the inhabitants. And the mother weasels would bring their young ones to the door and say, "Look, there goes the great Mr. Toad and the gallant water rat. And that's the famous Mr. Mole, of whom you've so often heard your father speak." And they'd tell them that if they were not good, the terrible badger would up and get them. Which, of course, was quite untrue, for Badger was really very fond of children, but it never failed to have its full effect. And that is the story of The Wind in the Willows. But I'm sure you'll all agree that it would be most unkind not to thank all those who made the story possible. Animals large and small, from near and far, and a few humans as well, who gave up so much of their time to take part. Especially we thank Mole, Ratty, Badger, and the one and only Mr. Toad. But above all, we are indebted to their creator, Kenneth Grahame.